All right. So in the interest of time, as people are pouring in, let's begin. We are almost at the top of the hour, a little ahead of that, in fact. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to SHRM Knowledge Cast, the third one in the series. This one is Culture at the Core, Causing the Effect You Wish to See in the World. I'm Neha Pant, part of the Knowledge and Advisory team at SHRM India, and your host for the next 60 minutes. Well, you can learn about our Knowledge Cast offering, which is a fairly recent initiative. Like I said, this is the third one in the series. If you'd like to learn more about our Knowledge Cast series, here's the link in the chat. You can refer to this. This will also have recordings of the past sessions and whatever sessions we do from here. Well, the father of modern management, Peter Drucker, concluded that we are in one of those great historical periods that occur every 200 or 300 years when people don't understand the world anymore and the past is not sufficient to explain the future. Now, as I was reading that statement, I realized that this was something that was said so many years ago, but rings truer than ever, even today. A lot has happened over the last 2 years, and we don't see the world like we used to anymore. In fact, if we look at it, no organization today will actually boast of its constancy or sameness or the status quo as compared to what it was 10 years ago. Stability today, in fact, is interpreted more as stagnation than steadiness, and organizations that are not in the business of change and transition are actually viewed as recalcitrant. So the frightening uncertainty that traditionally accompanied major organizational change has been superseded by the frightening uncertainty now associated with staying the same. We're writing a new chapter in history and defining a generation by the collective hardship we recently experienced. And today we are talking about organization culture. We have an esteemed guest for this knowledge cast with us today. Let me take this opportunity to quickly introduce him to you. Well, we bring to you Parag Paranjpe, who has 30 plus years of experience in the industry. He's currently Group CHRO at J Corp, parent company of Varun Beverages, largest bottler of Pepsi outside USA for the uninitiated. Devyani International, franchisee of Yum Foods, KFC, Pizza Hut, you may have heard of, Costa Coffee, and Wampo, all familiar names. He's also worked with companies such as Cadbury India, Thomas Cook, Bunge, ICICI Venture in HR leadership roles. And he's previously worked with Aditya Birla Group, initially as the group head for talent, staffing, and employee relations, and later as a CHRO of Grasim, which was pulp and fiber business. Now, that's the kind of experience that he's bringing in today. He's, of course, contributed to building cultures in different organizations. And of course, we are going to pick his brain today as he's building culture for J Corp today. But before we go there, in fact, before I invite him to share his thoughts, I wanted to invite our audience to first, participate and tell us what they think about organization culture. There's a lot that's been said about culture, right? We've heard of a lot of these quotes, and the cliched one being, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So that's not what we are discussing today. There are many quotes that we have heard on culture. There's another one that talks about the only thing of real importance that leaders do is to create and manage culture. This was said by Edgar Schein, who recently passed away, did phenomenal work on culture. And we've also heard of culture as not just one aspect of the game, it is the game. That was Lou Gerstner. So a lot of those, quotes that we've seen, and Mridula, yes, the most critical competitive advantage, Patrick Lencioni said that. We'll get to that in a bit, but before I get Parag in, who's already smiling, hearing all of this, about culture, I would like to ask all of you, and we would do this in form of a word cloud, and I would invite you all to maybe take out your mobile devices at this point and allow me a moment as I bring up my Menti screen. I actually want all of you to share in one word how you would describe your organization culture. And you can be brutally honest. The responses are anonymous, but we don't need fancy quotes, just one word. Tell us, what is it looking like for you? How would you describe your organization culture in just one word? So you'll see the code right at the top. I'm guessing pandemic has really made us familiar with this drill. So go to menti.com on your mobile devices. use the code 5174797. And as you use that code, you will have this question come up on your screens. Some of you are typing on the chat, but I would request you to quickly go to Menti on your mobile devices, open up a browser window. You can also do this on your laptop if that's what you're using. Menti.com, the code is 5174797. All right, 3 very positive words coming up, Parag: integrity, trust, and respect. Come on, show us some more candor. It's not all rainbows and butterflies, we all know. So tell us what's happening. All right, someone's told us stagnant. Pay parity, okay, inclusive. Caring, vibrant, interesting. Transparency. Closed. Focused on day-to-day. Change resistant. Interesting. Okay, 13 responses so far. I see there are more people on this call. So quickly give us your one words on what is it looking like for you in your organizations. We are not giving this away to anyone. These are anonymous. I don't know who's writing what. So go ahead, tell us what is it looking like for you. Okay, great. So Parag, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you with us on this Knowledge Cast. Well, as these responses are coming up, I see trust right in the middle. And it's heartening to see that more people are saying that, because, that's right in the center, bold, which means more and more people have said trust, which is an indicative of positive work culture that people are experiencing. But now closed has come in the middle, just when I said trust is, doing well there. What's catching your attention? What's, standing out to you?
So obviously trust and transparency are two very important ones which are standing out here. But what is another thing that is standing out which is not here? And I'm surprised. I don't know how many people have responded, really speaking, but whoever has responded, I cannot see a single response on performance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I cannot see anyone saying that we are a performance-driven
culture.
organization,
Yes.
or performance-oriented culture.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Very, very, great observation there. Experimental is what's coming up, though. Inward looking. All right. And there's some bit on non-inclusive.
I'm happy to read the word empathetic. That's quite something. Resilient. That's also very interesting.
Great. So values, it's all about people, work-life balance, humanity. Quite a few interesting words, Parag. And, with that, I wanted to, in fact, start our conversation by asking you, what does organization culture really mean to you? There's so many definitions we have all heard, so many different perspectives on how, we look at culture. Tell us, after 30 years, how would you define culture?
Yeah. So, it's very interesting topic, actually, and very intriguing topic. So, and that's why I decided to take this challenge, actually, to talk to fellow HR colleagues about this subject, which is so often, as you rightly said, cliched. It has become very cliched, right? It has, I think everybody talks about culture, right? From the management student who is still undergrad or who is still studying, right up to the CEOs of the organization and the management consultants who write big books. Everyone talks about this because this is very common, very easy to talk about, and equally difficult to understand, actually, or equally difficult to comprehend what it means. But one thing I want to make clear at the beginning itself, that I hate jargon. So I'm not going to use any jargon. And what you are going to hear from me is very direct, practical, and pragmatic understanding that I have of culture. So I don't profess that this is the universal truth and everybody should agree with me or otherwise. But this is my take, right? Based on my 35 years of experience, this is what I understand. And that's my attempt is to share my experience with all of you in the most pragmatic manner that I can and easy to understand manner that I can, right? So to go to your first question, Neha, in terms of saying what is culture, okay? And everybody knows, everybody has heard the cliched responses of collective belief and shared belief systems and so on and so forth, okay? For me, it's very simple. For me, it is if I ask 100 people in the organization, okay, and if 90 people give me a description of their culture correctly, I would say that is the culture of that organization. What I am essentially saying is that it is the collective understanding of people in the organization about what they think is the culture of this company. Okay, and doesn't matter what is written on the and what is hung on the walls, that this is our culture and this is our vision and this is what we want to be and so on and so forth. Irrespective of what is written, irrespective of what the leaders speak, when the grassroots employees across the organization believe this is our culture, that is the culture of the organization. Very simple definition. It has to be collectively understood together. It has to be understood. It has to be in the collective conscience of multitude of people in the organization, majority of people in the organization.
Right.
In simple words, that is culture. So I'll give an example. I was talking to somebody before I came for this session, right? And I asked somebody, if you were to, and in your organization, your past organization, if you were to describe culture in one word, what would that be? And this person said, one word, adaptable. Okay. And if I say, and if I ask this question, and I said, if I ask this question to several people in your company, geographically spread out, what will they say? And she said, adaptable. And that is the hallmark, that company's culture is adaptable. Because that is the shared understanding of thousands of people in that company spread across the geography, that we are an adaptable company.
Right.
So I think it is collective understanding, or it is collective conscious of those people working in the organization.
No, absolutely. And it's very interesting that you say that, adaptable did not even show up on our board cloud.
No,
and
it didn't
something
show
which is happening, right? I mean, that's something that we ought to do if we need to survive in this uncertainty, right? So then, do you think it's also coming from values, the shared values, of the organization, and how do those get understood by employees in the organization? So, what's your sense? Do values play an intrinsic role in decision making, and then in turn also shape the organization culture?
So I couldn't agree more with this statement, or couldn't emphasize the importance of values or principles, or whatever word you want to use, to describe what your organization stands for. Okay. And that plays a very, very, very important role among other factors in shaping the culture of your organization.
Right.
Okay. I have done this exercise a little bit, with in different settings in the past, and I have asked people, and I'm going to take some names of the organizations, but don't mistake me. This is my experience of talking to people and what people have told me. So I'm going to share that, and I'm also going to share my experience of where I come from, the companies where I work. So I asked in various settings. I asked many people, HR people, I asked, and line managers, I asked. I said, which company you think is the best place to work, or the best employer in our country?
Yeah.
Unequivocally, significant majority came up with the name Tata.
I thought as much.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I was like, why? Why do you say so? Unequivocally, everybody said that we believe, and none of them had worked in Tata, or very few had worked in Tata at some point in time. So it is all perception. And they said, we believe that Tata is a very value-driven organization. Okay. Now, obviously, the reputation as employer brand or reputation of that organization as a value-driven organization had shaped the perception as externally and culture internally of that organization. I have also spoken to people in Tata Group, in many companies, because we interview so many people and, we interact with so many people in the HR fraternity.
Right.
Again, majority of people say the same thing. Okay. So this is very important that the values of the organization, which are instilled over a period of time, years together, generations together, shape the culture of the organization.
Yeah.
I can share another example of Aditya Birla Group, where I come from, where I worked for a few years. One common thing, and it's a very disparate organization, like very large, very disparate global organization, okay, of different industries they operate in, from mining to retail to commodities to textile, you name it, they're into everything.
Right.
One common thing that exists in that group is 5 values they hold dear. You go anywhere in the group, any company, any office, sales office, factory, godown, warehouse, abroad, Canada, Australia, wherever you go. One thing you will see is 5 values are plastered everywhere. Last 25, 30 years, these values have been drilled down in the organization by the leaders of the company by walking the talk and showing that they care for the values. Another thing that happens is they have created the whole ecosystem around these values, ecosystem of processes, ecosystem of rewards and recognition, ecosystem of punishment and rituals of rewarding people who demonstrate organizational values.
Right.
So rewarding them, recognizing them, making an event out of it.
Right.
They have an annual event, where they recognize leaders and things like that.
Yeah.
One award is especially kept for values.
Correct. Yeah.
For recognizing employees at all levels who have demonstrated organizational values.
Right.
Okay. So they have created the whole ecosystem. And if you ask anybody in that organization, what is the most important thing, or how do you describe the culture of this company? And they will all say, our values define our culture. This is what we are.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to have the values or the principles or whatever you want to call terminology, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But that intrinsic belief that this is what we are really shapes the culture of that company.
And that's a very powerful message also, Parag. And, we say that leadership is responsible for creating the culture, cascading it, and really role modeling those values, for the rest of the workforce to follow. Now, in case of Tatas and, people who have not, of course, experienced that organization also hold, such high regard for the company. So then in your perspective, what do you think? I mean, how do leaders communicate this? Is it only by role modeling, or is there a different way to communicate culture, down to your employees? And what would you do in situations where you see that your employees do not possibly have the same values as your organizations, or they are not in alignment? What do you do then?
I'll share some examples, actually, more anecdotes from my experience.
Sure.
So communication takes many forms, right? It's not just verbal communication or an email or an organization circular. That's not only communication. There are hundreds of ways of communicating for the leader about the culture or about what that leader thinks is important for the company. Okay. It could be a number of ways. Like Jeff Bezos is known for writing one letter annually to their shareholders and to their employees. Since 97, he has been writing that letter. Okay. And that letter actually describes what Amazon is all about and what their culture is. So that is one way of communicating to the whole world, not only to the internal employees or external shareholders, because this gets published. And this stands of what what they are all about. Okay. I'll give you another example. I worked in a company very early part of my career. And the company was fantastic company, multinational company, great company. But the culture, I would say, was very, how do I put it? Let's say very slack, very lackluster, very casual. Okay. And there was no respect for discipline or performance.
Right.
So the meetings, even at the top management, the meetings would never start in time, never end in time. Never, ever. Nobody ever imagined that the meeting in this company can start in time.
Right.
Then the leadership changed and a new leader came. Okay. He observed this company for a couple of months. And I happened to be in HR, so I could observe this very closely. I was very fortunate to observe this very closely, this whole process. And he did only one thing. He said, being punctual, being punctual, punctuality is the most important thing I value, and I am going to drive this value. I am not a great marketeer. I am not a great salesperson. I am not a great manufacturing guy. I know only one thing, and that is being punctual. And he started demonstrating it right from the meetings of the top management, where he actually asked one of the most senior manager in the company, his direct report, to go out of the meeting because that person came 5 minutes late. And that sent a shockwave across that organization, shockwave. That this can happen to the most powerful person in the company, number 2 person in the company. That he was asked to leave the meeting room because he came 5 minutes late. Believe you me, people adapt very fast. And we have seen that in COVID, how we adapted, right? Quickly, overnight, people adapted. Every meeting started on time. Every meeting ended on time. And that itself drove the culture and the performance of the organization. Very differently. And it all happened in front of my eyes. When I look back now, I see the value of that communication demonstrated through one action and through several other messages and so on and so forth. So there are many methods of communication, Neha, for a leader who is creative and who wants to communicate.
No, absolutely. I agree. And, again, by role modeling it, it becomes, that much real for people. Now, Swati Joshi is asking a question, and this is to do with startups. And she's saying, how can one build or develop culture in a startup where you have, a bigger diversity, so to say? And, and of course, there's a lot of initial conflict, right, between founders as well. And there's difference of opinion. You're still figuring out what kind of a culture do we want to build. So, while you just explained how by demonstrating some of those actions yourself, you are guiding people's behavior. But any examples from startup world, something that you may have seen, experienced, is it any different?
I don't know about the startups, to be very honest with you, and I don't even know if any of them have any culture. I mean, I'm sure they have culture, but I don't think we want to emulate that culture. Okay. None of us want to emulate that culture. Okay. Because what they understand is very different of how to run the business. But that apart, let me give you an example. Not the current startups, the current crop of startups. All of us have heard of a company called Infosys. Just 30 years ago, Infosys was a startup. It was a startup. 10 people left 40 computers, gathered into a room and said that let's start a company. And that is how they started Infosys, maybe 35 years ago. Okay. And only one thing they said to themselves, those 10 people and their leader, that our company stands only by one value, and that is integrity. We will never ever compromise integrity, even if we have to close down the company. If we don't get business, if we don't become very big, doesn't matter. We will not compromise integrity. Now, the thing is, they demonstrated this collectively for 30 years. That is how shapes the culture of the company. Startup culture doesn't happen in a year or two. You cannot hope to create a culture in a short span of time. It's a very evolutionary process. It doesn't happen. There's no quick fix that I will do 4 rituals. I will do 5 training programs. I will do 2 surveys and I will get 3 consultants and I will now create the culture of the company. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
A lot of people in the company, majority of people, have to believe in something and have to consistently behave like that. Not just the leader, all the people.
Right.
And they all have to say in the same word, same voice. Our company stands for integrity. We will not pay bribes. We will not do wrong things to earn the business. The moment you make that statement, and all the people make that statement, that evolves into a culture of the organization. So that's my take on startup in terms of having patience and standing by what you really believe in.
Yeah. Yeah, true. And not a lot of startups are really staying the course, looking for valuations. Okay, no. So I also wanted to bring this up. Okay, Kanan Ram is asking, is culture imbibed or taught? And that's a fairly profound one there. And the whole culture transformation. And there was someone asking earlier, Manikandan, who's saying, what are the best way to transit the culture? And, we talk culture transformation, right? When we are, let's say, and there are multiple phases in an organization's growth where, a leaders seek to build a different sort of a culture, especially when there are acquisitions and there are 2 companies merging together. So what's your sense there? I mean, like you rightly said, culture evolves over a period of time. It's not created overnight, right? So then, and through communication, while you are with your actions, also trying to instill that message, in your employees. So then what's really happening? Are you teaching? Is it getting imbibed? Is it something that we are living and experiencing, and which is how it becomes part of, our everyday in our, organizations? And if we have to transition, then how do we go about that?
Okay, interesting. So let me ask, there are many questions you're asking in one, right? But let me
I'm just conscious of time as well.
Let me address that. So it is all of that. It can be taught, it can be learned, it can be imbibed, it can be, and it will evolve over a period of time. Okay. So let me ask this question. When we talk about transitioning culture or learning culture or imbibing culture, you ask any of these people who are attending this conference today or anywhere else, okay? What is the culture of India versus what is the culture of America?
Okay, audience, we have more than 50 people on this call. Tell us.
Just in one word or 2. Not like elaborate, just one word or 2.
In the chat, if you'd like to tell us what's the culture of India versus
as we understand.
As we understand. Okay. Yeah. Okay. One word we got there: diversification. Secular. So India, you mean secular? Confused. Tolerance. Okay. This unity in diversity, high versus low civic sense, close knit, closed versus open, traditional, adaptive, America, individualistic, India, team or collective. Again, collective versus individualistic, respectful, diverse thinking.
So fine, great. So if you see all of us in this country, okay, we believe that India has a culture. We are very old, very ancient culture. We have traditions, we have rituals, we are diversity, we have unity in diversity. We are collective. Family is more important. Society is more important. Where America is very clearly stands out as individualistic society. Right. I first, then everything else. Whereas in India, you ask any one of them, who comes first? You, family, society? The first answer is my family. 99%. I'm not saying there will be some people who will not individualistic here, but 99% people will say we are family oriented. Okay, family comes. So I am the last in the hierarchy. Family is the first. So I do everything for my family. I do for my parents, my spouse, my children, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, who has taught us this? Has anyone sat us down when we were in school and told us that, listen, India is collective? Nobody has taught us, right? We have just evolved to be like this because we see around this. We see all this around us all the time. This is the society in which we grow up. So when we grow up in this society, we learn automatically. An organization, and I'm sure many of you here are, I hope, have social background, okay, humanities background, sociology and other subjects background. I hope so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So organization is a society. It's just a microcosm of the larger society.
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's nothing else.
True.
Now, if organization is microcosm of a society, and if society we learn in a particular way, that is the way we learn in the organization also. True. In organization, we have a little more advantage. It can be more deliberate.
Yes, intentional.
Because the variables are more controllable. We can control the learning, we can control training programs, communications, rituals, reward and punishment mechanisms, policies of the organization can be managed, can be controlled. Okay, sure. And that communicates a message. So, for example, we all do onboarding, right, as HR people. Right. So we onboard a person. What do we mean when we say we onboard a person? We bring that person in the culture of this company. Yeah. We explain to them, this is how we do things here, right? And let that person sink into the organization and start absorbing, connecting with other people, learning from other people. So it's not just learning from top down, it is learning from all around us, below us, outside the organization also. So you join a company and you tell somebody, I joined this company. Okay. And there'll be many people who will tell you, oh, that company is known like this. That tells you something about that company. Right. Okay. And so you are imbibing, you are learning, and you are getting a message that this is the culture of the organization. Right. Then what you experience either reinforces that or acts against it. Right. Most probably reinforces that. That's how you learn the culture. Second question is about transitioning.
Yeah, transitioning. Yes.
Sorry, you're saying something.
Yeah. No, I was coming to that. In fact, Riddhi has, brought up a scenario here, which someone's also looking at as a consulting opportunity. But, it's about transition. So, and it's also about, so, you said we can be deliberate about culture, organizational culture, so to say. We can be intentional. And there could also be a point in time where you realize that, the current culture is not working for us. We need to change. We work with multiple clients, right? I know of this one organization that has been very hierarchical in nature. So a very high power distance, right? They're wanting to sort of change from there. They don't want, that sort of a distance in the organization, and they want to reduce it. But again, now, because you have been conditioned in that culture for so long, now for employees to start thinking differently, behaving differently, maybe imbibing newer values, that's another, uphill task. So when you say you can be deliberate, you can be intentional, then how do you actually do that transition? And I also wanted to bring up Riddhi's scenario, but maybe if you could address this question first, I'll then read out, what she's mentioned there.
Okay, so there is no one quick fix formula which can be captured in a book or a essay or a article. But I'll give you an example actually, that I think would explain the point better than just giving the theoretical answer.
Right.
All of us would have heard of a company called IBM, right? All of us know IBM. Once upon a time, IBM was known to be the blue chip company. It has become. But once upon a time, it was the bluest of the blue company. And they were in the business of mainframes. I don't think in this crowd here, not many people even would know what is a mainframe, because that's dinosaur, that's history, right? IBM was known for mainframe, and they prided themselves in that we are a mainframe company. We are not a laptop company. We are not a desktop company. We don't make those kind of machines. We are not IT company in that sense. We make mainframes, which are used by most of the large organizations and governments and so on and so forth. And because they were not changing out, because they were not transitioning, their culture had become like this, that we are a different type of organization. We are high-tech, mainframe organization. And then the new leader came. When IBM consistently started losing market share, consistently started losing profitability, and shareholders and everybody became very alarmed, they brought a new leader. I'm sure all of you, many of you would have read the book also that he has written, right? And he said, the first thing I want to do is change the culture of the organization. How do I change the bureaucracy and the culture of the organization? It was a big, very big behemoth. And so they started changing their culture, but it took them several decades actually to change it. It's not overnight. So they said, we are not a mainframe company. That itself was a big shock to many, many old timers in the company. Okay. IBM was otherwise known for white shirt and gray pants, gray trouser, and a black tie. That was the common uniform of IBM across the world. And that changed. And they said, no, we are going to be making machines, small machines, big machines. And ultimately, now they have become a services organization. So the movement of organization from being a dinosaur mainframe organization to a very nimble and agile services organization, it has taken them 30 years. It doesn't happen overnight. And during one decade, when they had the worst performance, worst profitability and market share, but they had that collective belief under this leader who influenced and impacted and directed also, and said, no, we are going to be a different company altogether. And today we know IBM as a services organization. Okay. So the transition of culture takes decades, and one has to be very patient and one has to be very consistent with what you are saying. Otherwise, it all becomes very confused and you will never know what animal it is becoming ultimately, So that is my short take with an example on transitioning of culture. You cannot hope to tell CEO who comes new and says that we must change the culture of the organization. You got to say, hang on, we will change. But we got to be prepared for a very long call. It's not going to change overnight. And it's a very slow burn. It takes long time. And you must have that patience to stay with the course and consistently send a common message.
And small actions, right? Baby steps. Now, when Riddhi is saying that, I'm working for a company where 4 different companies, employees were hired. Of these 4 companies, their founders and development from one, so 4 companies, their founders and development from one is from India, 2 are from the US, and 1 is from Belgium. Everyone has their different values and thought processes to work with. How can we set up a common culture in the company which has different mindset and processes?
Yeah. So again, the same, basically, the leadership of that organization have to sit together and understand, really speaking, 4 different companies which have come together. What are those companies? What is the context, the cultural context also from where those companies have been acquired, whether it is European organization, American organization, Indian organization, and they have very, very different cultural context and the business context. So one has to understand what those contexts are. How do we, and you can never hope to merge everything together and make it uniform. That's not possible. You've got to respect the diversity that different organizations and people in those companies are bringing to you. If the leadership is wise enough to leverage that diversity and say that, wow, we are now becoming a lot different, a lot more than what we were before when we were just one company. Okay. Now it is all easy to say, but it's going to take humongous effort into your leadership to sit together, to respect, accept and respect the diversity that these 4 acquisitions are bringing together on the table and take the best out of it say what this is what we want to emulate, and
Right.
go out and actually communicate, in hundreds of ways that are available for you to communicate, and stay the course consistently, send the same message.
Again, very powerful. We talk about inclusive workplace culture, right? And we also then talk of cultural fitment, when we hire. So how are these two really talking to each other? If on one hand, we are trying to bring in diversity, create an inclusive workplace where, employees can bring their so-called authentic selves, and we are more and more making a case for that. And then in a situation where we hire, select basis, the culture fitment. Now, what's your take? How do we manage that polarity?
So to be very honest, I don't see a polarity in that. Okay, why? I will tell you.
Okay.
So when you say inclusiveness, okay, now that's not something which is very, maybe the language is new, maybe the jargon is new, maybe all the fuss that is being created around it nowadays is new. Okay, it doesn't mean that it was not there. Of course, it was there in the organizations. It's become more conscious. Okay, so and many things shape this thinking, right? So let me give you an example again. Okay, so we talk about inclusive, that includes diversity, that includes hiring of women employees in the organization, right? And of course, differently abled and so on and so forth. But let's just stick to gender diversity right now for the sake of this discussion. Okay. Now, more in the beginning, I mentioned that the societal norms change around you. Okay. And that also starts impacting the organization's culture, because it starts impacting the societal culture. In India, for example, just 30, 40 years ago, okay, women going out and working was not a norm. Okay, all this is last 40 years that has started happening. More and more women have started going out. More and more women have started getting education. And more women have started going in the profession and organizations which were never thought of before that women could go in. Now they are fighter pilots. Now they are working in the forefront, in the front, northern front, China front. They are being deployed, in the army. Who would have imagined this a few years ago, right? So baby steps happen before we know, and it happens very unconsciously, because societal norms are changing around us. And now it has become very common that girls will study and go to work. Yeah, it's the most common thing. What is there to talk about? Okay. It was not so, but it has happened. Now, it is a very, as I mentioned, it's a slow burn. It has taken a long time for this process to evolve. It's not happened overnight. Even in organizations, who would have imagined 20 years ago that there will be a thing called POSH? It's there today, right? There is a law. Now, law and regulations also impact the culture of the organization. Okay, so now there is a law which protects women employees in the organization, right? And that shapes the culture, changes and impacts the culture of the organization. Because there is a lot of training, there is a lot of deliberate communication, there is a very designed intervention around this subject, right? How do you treat women in the organization? How do you ensure that you respect diversity in the organization? How do you make sure that all the ecosystem and infrastructure is created in such a manner that women feel welcome in the organization, right? All this has not happened over short time, but laws and regulations have played a role. Laws and regulations have evolved from the changing societal norms and the changing public pressure on the regulators and the governments and the organizations. Like I said, organization again is a microcosm of society. Okay, so whatever is happening in the society reflects in the organization.
Yes.
And what happens in the organization is sent back to the society.
Correct, absolutely. And we still have about 15 minutes left for this conversation. So while you have the feedback link, please don't treat it as the end of the session yet. I have two important questions that I want to ask, but I have parked them for later. Parag, there are a few that have come from our audiences here. Narendra, let me first address yours. Yes, you will get PDCs for this. You can reach out to us later about that. So this one here from Ravi Jot, who's asking about how to overcome cultural biases and prejudices made by leaders, or the prejudices that
Sorry,
they
can
may
you
have, and
please?
how.
Sorry, can you
Sorry.
please repeat that if you don't mind?
Yes, I was saying Ravi Jod's question here in the chat. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's asking about how do you overcome cultural biases and prejudices that the leaders may have? And I'm sure, Parag, you may have had situations like that, right, in your career journey,
Oh
when
yes,
leaders were sitting on
indeed,
such certain.
indeed, indeed, indeed. And that's a tough one actually, because uh, first of all, you need to have the you need to recognize. First of all, one is to recognize that the leaders I work with or the leader I work with comes with some biases. Okay. And one must have empathy that this leader also comes from the same society I come from. So they're not fallen from the sky. They're not coming from Mars. Right. So all of us have certain biases. All of us have certain prejudices because of our upbringing, because of our background, and so on and so forth. Whether they are conscious or whether they are unconscious, they are there. Okay. So first of all, we need to acknowledge that doesn't having a bias or a prejudice doesn't mean that somebody is a villain. All that is required is understanding and empathy. And once you do that, you will be able to communicate that to the leader in the most empathetic manner. Okay. And of course, then you have to deploy various tactics because you can't suddenly go in your boss's cabin and say that, look, I think you have a lot of biases, and you may not have a job next day if you do something foolish. But of course, there are a number of ways in which you communicate. Okay. So direct communication, indirect communication, communication through different people and different ways and different groups of people communicating the same thing, be it training programs, be it conferences, be it reading material, be it feedback sessions of 360-degree. There are hundreds of ways in which one can communicate and say that, look, this is how we try to change. Sometimes it's revelation, you suddenly show mirror to somebody and that changes overnight actually that person's perception. Oh my God, what I was thinking. And how different it is. But that comes from personal revelation. So that very powerful experience, if you can really design a very powerful experience, okay, for the leader you want to impact, you want to influence, and make that leader go through that very powerful experience of personal change at a personal level, I'm sure that will really make an impact in terms of changing their mindset.
Yeah, more often than not, consultants are brought from outside to communicate that message because internally
they are.
and then they are made the scapegoats. We are not saying it; they are saying it.
They are saying it, yeah.
And in your opinion, the powerful experience that you spoke of, do these surveys really work? The culture surveys, the engagement surveys, they are also in some ways telling you about how people are experiencing your culture, right? And what needs to change, what needs to shift.
It definitely shows you a mirror. There is no doubt about it. Okay. So maybe it is not the most transparent or crystal clear mirror, but nevertheless, you are able to see your image by and large very clearly in a well-administered anonymous survey. There is no doubt about that. You really get to know about your organization, what collectively it is saying. I have gone through several of these surveys, years after years, right, in many organizations. And I have seen many leaders, when they see the first cut presentations by the consultants of the survey results, many times there is a denial. Oh no, we are not like that. Okay. But so you go through the whole process of denial to acceptance, right? And as a deft HR professional, you should be able to help them walk the entire journey from denial, rejection, anger, acceptance. So you got to walk the whole mile with them and help them understand that this is the reality. Now let us figure out what to do. How do we change some ways of working here? How do we change some rituals? How do we change some policies? How do we change some behaviors? And so on and so forth.
True. And when you say that, I'm reminded of this book, The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. And, you know, there he talks about the art and practice of learning organizations, explores how organizations can actually cultivate a culture of continuous learning and improvement. Now, of course, in this book, he argues that, you know, a culture is essential for organizations, you know, to adapt and thrive in a rapidly changing world, the whole learning culture. In your experience, Parag, of having worked with these different organizations and also seen the kind of, you know, shifts that have happened at the societal level, do you think our organizations are learning? Have they actually moved from being machines to so-called living organisms, if I may address it more metaphorically?
So yes and no. Many companies have evolved over a period of time and they have changed and they have adapted. Okay. And those who haven't are no longer in the business. Examples have come to my mind. How many people now know the story? And I'm sure all of you have heard the names of Nokia and BlackBerry, right? They were the absolute yardstick in handset manufacturing technology. BlackBerry became BlackBerry, right? And Nokia. So the only phones that we would aspire at one point in time were Nokia. Both companies have closed down because they didn't change. There was no adaptability. Okay. And whereas the other organization, whether they are Chinese organization or whether they are Korean companies like Samsung, they change very quickly. Okay. And so organizations do change. And if they change, they survive, they thrive, they become successful. IBM went through that entire process of going down the line, down the hill, and again coming up and becoming again a globally successful organization. And so many other examples can be given where organizations have definitely learned. Even closer home in India, okay, there are companies after companies who have vanished from the business scenario just because they did not change. How many of you have heard of, or I'm sure you know of, Bajaj scooters? We don't have to go far away to America. Okay. So Bajaj scooter was the iconic scooter in the country. Everyone and their uncle wanted to have a Bajaj scooter. Okay. And there was a scooter brand name called Chetak. And that Chetak, you had to pay in foreign currency, some part, and wait in queue for 3 years to get your allotment of scooter. Okay. Now, same Bajaj today is the market leader in world-class motorcycles because they have changed. They also went through a very difficult time when, and it is all in the, you know, in the news, in the interviews, and in the books that have been written, his studies have been written. The patriarch of the family, Mr. Bajaj, he never wanted to change. He never wanted to stop scooter manufacturing. His son came and he said, nothing doing. This is an old way of working. We can't work like this anymore. We got to bring Japanese technology. We got to bring, you know, new ways of working. We got to adopt the Japanese management style and working. And today, same Bajaj, which had become a dinosaur, or which was on the verge of extinction, because the scooter sale dropped like this overnight. Okay, because motorcycles became popular. And same Bajaj has become very successful. Now, there are many examples like this where companies have adapted and companies have changed, and the examples are all around us.
Right. So we are saying that we are evolving, we are learning, we are doing better. We moved away from the traditional command and control style of management as well. We are a lot more inclusive today than what we used to be. And of course, you know, we'll continue to evolve as, you know, we evolve as a society as well. You know, there was one quote that came up right in the beginning of our conversation which was on how organization culture is the ultimate source of competitive advantage. And that's because, culture is so hard to replicate. And, this was something that Patrick Lencioni said. He's also written this very famous book, the five dysfunctions of a team. So fairly well known there. I wanted to sort of move to Netflix, which is, the American company, of course, and, his founder who, wrote this book, No Rules Rules. Reed Hastings and Erin Meyer wrote this one, and Reed Hastings has now stepped down. But, he, in that book, there were quite a few concepts that he wrote about. And, there was no unlimited vacation policy, no policy on business expenses, many things like that. Now, they managed their culture very differently, and the kind of culture that they set up as well. Things like radical candor, which is to be direct with your feedback, really be able to candidly express your thoughts, or for that matter, fortified talent density, which means that, you do not have to hire too many people, no rock stars, as against one rock star that you can pay a lot more and keep your, team lean. And if somebody wants to leave, they want to leave, but then you don't, really look at enhancing their compensation when they bring you a competitive offer. So there were quite a few of these, unconventional rules that he spoke of. Now, why I'm sharing this is because I wanted to ask you, then, can you actually look at companies like these and really benchmark organization culture? Does it really take, is it different for creative organizations because they can work like this, and this might not work in other organizations? So competitive advantage, of course, because replication cannot happen. But can we still look at the so-called best practices or benchmarks? Do you think those work?
We don't have enough time. I would have taken a long time to,
I know. I made you crack up on that one. Go ahead.
Shred this notion to pieces of copying best practices from one to another. Okay.
Yes.
So what are we talking about? Where is Netflix? What kind of industry? What kind of nation, country, culture they are in? And we are talking about, so what we do is, unfortunately, we just say that they have a culture of, hey, no restrictions, no holidays, no leave policies, all free. Let's do that. You can't just pluck something that you read somewhere without understanding anything of that company, the culture, and how, in what context does it operate. I mentioned at the beginning, that most importantly, is the context in which that business operates. Okay. Without understanding the context, if you try to copy, it will fail so miserably, and your career will fail so miserably along with that. Okay. So it will crash land like nobody's business. You got to really understand the industry in which you operate, the product or service you are manufacturing and making and offering to your customers, the industry in which you operate, the technology with you operate, the society in which you exist, the country in which you exist, and then decide what is right for me, for my organization. You may learn from everybody, and most of the times you should learn, and you should learn what not to do. So this is one of the things that you should also learn.
Yeah, no, big techs,
not to copy blindly and say that I want to, oh my God, Netflix is doing this, I want to do it in my company.
Absolutely, yeah. And I honestly wanted, to hear your views on that, because a lot of times, people are enamored by big techs and the way they work, right? And then there are these books written.
Oh, and the same, wait a minute. So big tech company, right? Let's talk about that. Spend a minute on this, okay? Half a minute.
Half a minute, yes.
Google, the best place to work for decades together, right? Everybody and their nephew, uncle, everybody wants to work in Google. We all have heard about the Google way of working, the food, the 5-star food, and so on and so forth. And so, everything that we know. Okay. Now, same Google, day before yesterday, you would have heard the news that they fired 12,000 people. Yes. And on the same day, they gave a salary hike of $26 million to their CEO, Sundar Pichai. Same day. 12,000 people fired and salary increase to CEO of $226 million. Right? Now, what do you want to copy? You want to copy their canteen and the free food? And
apparently
and the masseurs
that cost is being managed too.
And the mental well-being experts they had kept in the office, all of them, 50 of them have been fired.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, thank you
we
so
have
much,
to
Parag.
figure out what we are as a company, what we are as a culture, what we want to copy, from where we want to learn, and what we want to bring. Because it will work only in that particular context. It can't work in any other context.
Right. While content may be king, but context, is greater than that. So yeah, keeping that in mind, I think is crucial. Thank you so much, Parag. We are almost, done. It's in fact a minute past our time. But thank you so much. Wonderful perspectives. A lot of that appreciation is showing up in the chat as well. And thank you everyone for joining. I hope you've shared feedback with us on those poll questions that came up on the screen. Thank you so much. Like I said, we have this Knowledge Cast series going on. This was the third in the series. There are more coming up. We do one every month, and we look forward to hosting you once again. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely rest of the evening. Once again, Parag, thank you so much for joining. It was a pleasure having you on this session, and we hope to see you soon on another one.
Thank you very much. Really, really, I really hope that it was useful for my HR colleagues here for the fraternity, and really delighted to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me, Neha. Really appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for gracing us with your presence. And of course, we will see you another session soon. With that,
Absolutely. Thank you.
would like to say bye, everyone, and see you soon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.